My name is Anne-Marie Knaus, and I was 18 years old when I finally understood that my family never loved me the way people mean when they say that word. I grew up in one of those homes where affection felt conditional, where love was handed out like a performance review. Hit your targets, earn a nod. Miss the mark, earn a lecture about potential and disappointment. It wasn't shouted. It was worse than that. It was delivered calmly, like a policy my parents had signed years ago and expected me to follow without question. At least, that was how it worked for me. My older sister Natalie operated under an entirely different system. Same roof, same parents, different universe. I figured that out when I was 7. I came home with my report card pressed flat in both hands, the paper warm from how tightly I'd been gripping it. Straight A's across every subject, 1 A- in gymnastics. I walked into the kitchen like I was carrying proof that I deserved to exist. My mother was at the counter, phone in hand, flipping through something that looked like a party seating chart. I slid the report card toward her. She didn't smile. She didn't even look up right away. When she finally did, she scanned it in 2 seconds and said, "Why didn't you try harder in gymnastics?" That was it. 2 weeks later, Natalie brought home B's and C's, and my parents took her out for ice cream to celebrate her improvement. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my homework open, listening to the garage door roll down behind them. The sound felt like a verdict, like something closing. I learned my place in the hierarchy that night. Cold lesson to learn at 7. But early lessons stick. My parents ran behind closed doors. Perfection was maintained like a brand. My father's entire identity was built around professional success and social positioning. He sat on the country club board, donated to the right charities, and worked every room like he was calculating the transactional value of each handshake. He didn't just talk, he negotiated, even at our dinner table. My mother was his perfect complement. She hosted dinner parties with magazine-worthy table settings, volunteered at organizations that mattered, and befriended women whose husbands could benefit my dad's business. She didn't collect friends, she collected leverage. Together, they constructed a facade of family perfection. And maintaining it required total cooperation from their children. Natalie understood that game instinctively. She charmed my father's clients, complimented my mother's hosting skills with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm, and presented exactly the image of accomplished young womanhood my parents wanted to project. Her actual behavior behind closed doors mattered very little compared to her public performance. I absorbed that lesson over years of watching her escape consequences that would have absolutely destroyed me. Natalie was 3 years older, born with this effortless charm I never inherited. Teachers forgave her late assignments. Boys tripped over themselves around her. She sailed through high school with mediocre grades that never warranted concern, and an uncanny ability to redirect blame with a laugh and a hand on someone's arm. I watched from the sidelines, taking mental notes on survival in a house where favoritism operated as openly as the central heating system. There were moments when the unfairness felt crushing. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Why were Natalie's failures treated as quirky and lovable, while my smallest imperfections were treated as evidence of character flaws? But around 14, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I stopped expecting fairness. I started expecting patterns. Once you recognize the predictable rules, you can navigate them. You can stop bleeding every time the same blade hits the same place. Emotion gave way to strategy. Hurt transformed into observation. My bedroom became my sanctuary. Maps of distant places covered the walls. Books about people who overcame impossible circumstances filled my shelves. I spent hours researching universities far enough from Virginia that casual parental drop-ins would be impractical. Every essay, every extracurricular, every test I aced, each one was another brick in the wall I was building between my present and my future. By junior year, I had built an entire identity around being Natalie's opposite. Where she was social, I was studious. Where she was reckless, I was calculated. My walls displayed academic trophies. Hers were plastered with concert tickets and party Polaroids. My parents called Natalie vibrant. They called me dependable. Dependable meant invisible, but useful. Then, the summer before my senior year, I discovered something that would become my insurance policy. Natalie had been dating Brandon Montgomery, the son of my father's biggest client. Brandon drove a BMW, wore watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and carried himself like the world was meant to make room for him. He treated Natalie like a decorative accessory, something to show off when it benefited him. My parents practically glowed when he came over. Dad would talk investments. Mom would fuss over appetizers like royalty had arrived. Their daughter marrying into the Montgomery family represented everything they had worked for, a permanent elevation of our name into genuinely elite social circles. They were so blinded by the potential benefits that they never questioned Natalie's affection for him. But I noticed inconsistencies from day one. Natalie complained about Brandon constantly when our parents weren't around. His conversation skills, his fashion choices, his insufferable habit of talking about sailing. She rolled her eyes at his texts. She canceled plans to meet other guys whose existence she carefully hid. The disconnect between her public performance as the devoted girlfriend and her private contempt was jarring, even for someone accustomed to her duplicity. And then, one night, my laptop crashed the week I needed it most. Summer assignments, college applications, everything stacked on top of each other like a tower I couldn't let fall. Natalie was out. Her bedroom door was half open. Her laptop sat on the bed, lit up, screen glowing. I told myself I was just borrowing it. I told myself it wasn't snooping. I told myself I had earned the right to borrow a tool in a house where I was expected to earn everything. Her browser was open, a bank page. My stomach tightened, like my body knew what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Then I saw it. Transfers, statements, text conversations, and the thing that made my blood run cold, a spreadsheet, not just a list, a system. Columns tracking each withdrawal, notes about the emotional manipulation technique she'd used, running totals, projected future extractions, like Brandon was a resource mine and Natalie was planning how to strip it clean. One entry read, "Told him my car needed repairs, cried about feeling like a burden. Got $3,500. Another, investment opportunity pitch. Used business terminology Dad taught me. $8,000 transfer confirmed. She had extracted nearly $40,000 from him in 8 months. I sat there in her room for almost an hour, scrolling through months of calculated deception. My hands felt numb. Brandon wasn't exactly sympathetic with his entitled attitude, but nobody deserved to be systematically exploited by someone pretending to love them. The sheer scale of it revealed depths of dishonesty that exceeded even my most cynical expectations. My first instinct was to tell my parents, to finally put undeniable evidence in front of them and force them to see what Natalie really was. That impulse lasted about 30 seconds. 18 years of data told me what would happen next. They would minimize. They would excuse. They would blame me for finding it. The evidence would be dismissed. I'd be punished for snooping. Natalie would cry on cue, and my parents would clutch her like she was the victim of my cruelty. So instead, I did something that felt both cowardly and smart. I took screenshots of everything, every statement, every spreadsheet tab, every text conversation. I uploaded it to a secure cloud folder and named it something boring, something invisible, like my life had trained me to be. Call it paranoia. Call it preparation. I just knew, in my bones, those files were going to matter someday. And as I stared at Natalie's neat little spreadsheet, her tidy columns of theft dressed up as opportunities, a thought settled in my chest, heavy and quiet. If she could do this to Brandon, she could do it to anyone, including me. Once I started collecting evidence, I couldn't stop. At first, I told myself it was just insurance, something to keep tucked away in case Natalie ever tried to turn one of her schemes toward me. But over time, the act of documenting became strangely grounding. Every screenshot, every saved message, every copied file felt like proof that I wasn't imagining things, that the imbalance I'd lived with my entire life had a shape, a pattern, a paper trail. Whenever opportunity presented itself, Natalie's phone left face up on the counter, her laptop unlocked while she showered, her voice drifting down the hallway during late-night calls, I paid attention. I listened. I recorded. I cataloged. She bragged more than she realized. On one call with a friend, she laughed about how easy Brandon was to steer if she cried at the right moment. On another, she complained that his parents were starting to ask questions and joked that she might need to slow the withdrawals for a month or two so things didn't look suspicious. Each new revelation went into my growing digital archive, carefully dated and labeled. I told myself I was just being cautious, but beneath that justification lived something more complicated: validation. For years, I had been told, explicitly and implicitly, that I was oversensitive, that I misinterpreted things, that Natalie didn't mean it that way, that my parents were doing their best. Seeing the evidence laid out so cleanly was like watching fog lift from a familiar landscape. The problem had never been my perception. The problem was that no one wanted to see. Senior year rolled forward with the predictable rhythm of college applications and family dinners. My accomplishments were acknowledged with brief nods, quickly eclipsed by Natalie's latest drama. She had graduated by then and was supposedly attending community college while living at home, though her actual schedule seemed to consist of brunch dates, shopping trips, and last-minute cancellations funded by Brandon's ongoing generosity. My college counselor, Mrs. Henderson, became an unexpected ally. She was the first adult who looked at my transcripts and didn't ask what was wrong with me. Instead, she asked where I wanted to go. During our sessions, she encouraged me to aim higher than I ever had, reminding me that my record placed me in contention for schools I'd quietly assumed were out of reach. The acceptance letters arrived like permission slips for a life I barely dared imagine. Georgetown's thick envelope felt heavier than the others. I opened it alone in my bedroom, reading the words 3 times before letting myself believe them. For the first time in 18 years, something I wanted had materialized purely because I'd earned it. I applied to 12 universities. I got into 10. Georgetown became my top choice, not just for the program, but for the distance. Physical, emotional, symbolic distance from the Collins household. My parents agreed to fund my education with the same lukewarm enthusiasm they applied to everything involving me. It wasn't pride, it was investment. Reputation management. My father reviewed the tuition numbers like he was evaluating a business acquisition, calculating return on investment. My mother suggested a state school closer to home, just in case. I framed my ambitions in language they respected: rankings, prestige, optics. They agreed, with conditions. Maintain performance. Avoid embarrassment. Translation: stay useful. Stay quiet. The fall semester of my freshman year changed me. For the first time, I existed outside Natalie's gravity. Professors knew my name for my ideas, not my family. I made friends who laughed at my dry humor and didn't expect anything from me except honesty. I worked part-time at the campus library, stacking books and learning the quiet dignity of earning my own money. Those months tasted like freedom. My closest friend became Ryan, my roommate, a steady, thoughtful presence with a family that felt almost unreal to me. His parents actually liked each other. His siblings supported one another. Hearing him talk about holidays felt like anthropological research into a culture I'd never lived in. One night, after listening to my carefully edited stories about home, Ryan said something that stuck with me. That doesn't sound normal. No one had ever named it that directly before. The library job gave me more than pocket money. It gave me independence, and a supervisor who talked openly about emergency funds, credit building, and financial boundaries. lessons my executive-level father had never taught me, because he'd never wanted me independent enough to not need him. Thanksgiving shattered the illusion that distance alone could protect me. I came home to find the house buzzing with excitement. Natalie was engaged. My mother had already begun planning an elaborate summer wedding. The engagement ring was enormous, theatrical, designed to be noticed. Natalie displayed it constantly, angling her hand toward the light, resting it on surfaces where guests couldn't miss it. Brandon beamed beside her, proud and proprietary. No one asked about my classes, or my friends, or how college felt. Wedding planning swallowed every conversation. Venue scouting, catering tastings, dress appointments. My mother treated the event like her coronation. My father talked guest lists like they were networking charts. During dinner, Natalie announced she wanted me in the wedding party. The request was wrapped in performative affection. Tears, talk of sisterhood, declarations about how much I meant to her. My parents watched, pleased. I agreed. Saying no would have caused a scene that would follow me back to campus in the form of guilt-laden phone calls and passive-aggressive care packages. The real purpose behind the invitation revealed itself quickly. Natalie started calling constantly. She wanted me to cover for her when she missed bridal appointments to meet other men. She needed me to memorize details of fake investment opportunities for Brandon's family gatherings. She asked me to reassure our parents that certain credit card charges were wedding-related. The requests came at all hours, interrupting study sessions and library shifts. Each one pushed me further into complicity. Refusing felt impossible in a family that had trained me to accommodate. This wasn't observation anymore. I was participating. The stress seeped into everything. I stopped sleeping well. My appetite vanished. Ryan noticed the way I flinched every time my phone buzzed. One night, he confronted me, demanding to know what was happening. So I told him. Everything. The favoritism, the fraud, the evidence, Natalie's demands. Saying it out loud felt like releasing pressure from a valve that had been sealed for 18 years. Ryan didn't interrupt. He didn't minimize. He believed me. Together, we started thinking in contingencies, transfer options, financial aid alternatives, emergency plans. One night, buried in Georgetown's website, we found it. A modified program for students facing unexpected financial hardship, reduced tuition, flexible scheduling, same degree. I applied quietly. Insurance. Not a plan. And as Christmas approached, with Natalie's wedding dominating every breath in the house, I felt the walls closing in. I had never been closer to the truth, and I had never been more trapped by it. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in manufactured cheer. My mother excelled at that, creating warmth without intimacy, beauty without honesty. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. White lights traced every railing. Appetizers were arranged with surgical precision. The annual holiday party was my parents' pride, a living advertisement for the Collins brand. This year, it felt heavier. I had been home for 3 days, counting the hours until I could escape back to campus. Natalie floated through the house like a celebrity, her engagement ring catching the light at every angle. Brandon hovered beside her, smiling like a man who believed he had won something. I stationed myself near the refreshment table, nursing a glass of sparkling cider and making polite conversation with relatives whose names I barely remembered. My cousin Kevin stopped by and remarked that I seemed different, more confident, more settled. The comment touched something tender, proof that growth was visible to people who weren't invested in ignoring it. Then the Montgomerys arrived. They entered fashionably late, drawing attention the way wealthy families do without trying. Brandon's mother, Victoria Montgomery, wore a statement necklace that probably cost more than my semester's textbooks. His father, Charles, moved straight toward my dad, already deep in conversation about markets and projections. Natalie lit up, sliding seamlessly into her role. The trouble started quietly. Victoria cornered me near the punch bowl, her smile pleasant but her eyes sharp. She asked how I liked college. Then she shifted casually to Natalie. How excited I must be. How lucky Brandon was. Then she began asking questions. Small ones at first, about Natalie's investments, about timelines, about returns Brandon had mentioned but hadn't seen yet. Her voice was conversational, but the questions were precise, surgical. She mentioned, almost as an aside, that she'd worked in forensic accounting before retiring. Ice slid down my spine. Victoria wasn't fishing. She was confirming. She already suspected something was wrong. She wanted to know whether I would lie. Every instinct I developed screamed at me to deflect, to smile, to protect the family narrative at all costs. That instinct had kept me safe for years, but something inside me cracked. 18 years of swallowed resentment, months of forced complicity, the quiet terror of knowing the truth and being punished for it. I told her she was right. I didn't give details. I didn't offer evidence. I just confirmed that Natalie was not who she appeared to be. Then I excused myself and walked away, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The fallout was immediate. Victoria pulled Brandon aside. Brandon confronted Natalie. Natalie cried, loudly, dramatically, and pointed directly at me. Within an hour, the party was over. Guests left in awkward clusters, murmuring. The lights stayed on. The silence felt deafening. My parents sat rigidly. My father stood behind his desk, arms crossed, already certain of the verdict. Natalie occupied the leather chair usually reserved for important clients, dabbing at dry eyes that weren't producing tears. The accusations came fast. I was jealous. I was resentful. I couldn't stand to see Natalie happy. I had embarrassed the family in front of their most important client. When I tried to explain, when I mentioned the money, the lies, the evidence, I was cut off. Natalie sobbed harder. My mother accused me of fabricating stories. My father said I was sabotaging my sister's future out of spite. The patterns held. My father announced my tuition would be suspended immediately unless I issued a full apology. To Natalie, to Brandon, to both families. I would also spend the remainder of winter break writing letters of apology to anyone who had witnessed my outburst. Only then would they consider continuing to fund my education. Without their money, Georgetown was impossible. My future dangled on a string he believed he controlled. Natalie watched me carefully, her expression barely hiding triumph. This was her arena. She expected me to break. My mother hovered behind my father, discomfort flickering briefly across her face before disappearing behind loyalty. They waited for tears, for bargaining, for desperation. What they got instead was calm. "Fine," I said. I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me, I heard my mother question whether they'd been too harsh. My father's response was confident, dismissive. "She'll come around by morning," he said. "She has no other choice." He was wrong. I packed through the night, quietly, methodically, like someone executing a plan she'd rehearsed 100 times in her head. I confirmed my transfer to the modified program and paid the deposit with my own savings. I packed clothes into suitcases I'd hidden weeks earlier. I boxed books and slid them into the garage. My laptop, the key to everything, never left my sight. By 6 a.m., my childhood bedroom was stripped of anything that mattered. When I carried the last box downstairs, my family was waiting, still in pajamas, still unprepared. My mother demanded to know what I was doing. My father demanded to know where I thought I was going. I set the box down and told them calmly I was leaving. My transfer had been approved, tuition paid, housing arranged. I'd be gone within the hour. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. My father's leverage evaporated in real time. Natalie stared at the boxes, her face tight. Then she whispered, "Please tell me you didn't send it." The room went still. I let the silence stretch. Then I told them. I had emailed Brandon every piece of evidence, the bank statements, the texts, the spreadsheet, the recordings. I explained, truthfully enough, that the email had been scheduled to send automatically at midnight unless I canceled it. I hadn't. By now, Brandon had it. So did his parents. My mother made a sound like she'd been punched. My father grabbed his phone, dialing frantically. Natalie didn't move. The call connected briefly. Charles Montgomery's voice was controlled, furious. The engagement was over. Their attorneys would be in contact. The business relationship was under review. The call ended. My father's face went gray. 30% of his firm's revenue, gone. I picked up my box and walked toward the door. My father called after me, his voice breaking into something almost pleading. He wanted to talk, to discuss consequences. I turned back one last time. I told him consequences were exactly what I understood. The car arrived. I left. The car ride to the station felt unreal, like the world had tilted and I was sliding into a version of my life I'd only ever imagined in private. I watched my parents' house disappear through the rear window, the porch lights still on, the carefully curated exterior suddenly hollow. My phone buzzed nonstop, missed calls, texts, voicemails I didn't listen to. I didn't need to. I already knew what they would say. The train pulled away from the platform with a quiet finality that made my chest ache. Not from regret, but from the release of something I'd been carrying for as long as I could remember. Control had shifted, and they knew it. The fallout hit fast. By the time I reached Washington, Brandon had ended the engagement publicly. His family demanded full repayment of the money Natalie had taken, plus interest. Their attorneys moved with terrifying efficiency. My father's attempts at damage control went nowhere. The Montgomerys weren't interested in protecting appearances. They were interested in consequences. Montgomery Industries terminated their relationship with my father's firm within weeks. That single client had represented nearly a third of the company's revenue. Layoffs followed, then restructuring, then panic. Natalie moved back home in disgrace. Her social circle evaporated as the story leaked through the same suburban network that had once celebrated her engagement. Friends who had laughed at her jokes stopped answering texts. Invitations dried up. My parents tried reaching me repeatedly. I didn't respond. January passed quietly. I settled into the modified program, juggling coursework and work hours with a strange sense of peace. The schedule was demanding, but it was mine. Every bill I paid, every class I passed, felt like proof of something solid and earned. Ryan's family hosted me until housing opened, offering warmth that still felt unfamiliar. His mother made breakfast without conditions. His father gave advice without leverage. Watching them interact rewired something in me. This was what normal looked like. By spring, the news broke locally. My father's firm was under investigation. Losing the Montgomery account had triggered desperation. Corners cut, numbers fudged. One client got audited and everything unraveled. My father avoided prison, but he lost his CPA license permanently. The firm dissolved. The house, the big one with the 3-car garage and immaculate lawn, was sold. My parents moved into a condo. My mother took a part-time retail job. Natalie got her first real job, answering phones at a real estate office. No more brunch dates. No more spreadsheets tracking stolen money, just reality. I heard all of this secondhand, through cousins and acquaintances who couldn't resist updating me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. By the time spring semester ended, my life had settled into something quiet and unfamiliar. Stability. I worked more hours. I studied harder. I learned how to live inside my own decisions without waiting for permission or punishment. Financial independence didn't taste glamorous. It tasted like instant noodles and cheap coffee. But it also tasted like dignity. Ryan helped me move into a tiny studio apartment that summer. The neighborhood required caution and 3 locks on the door, but the rent was mine. The space was mine. I furnished it with thrift store finds and plants that somehow survived my inconsistent watering. Every time I unlocked the door, I felt a small, steady pride. My internship at a consulting firm turned into a part-time offer. My supervisor noticed my work ethic and didn't ask about my last name. He didn't care who my parents were. He cared that I showed up, that I delivered, that I didn't make excuses. That was enough. A year passed. Then 2. I heard from Natalie once, an overly long message about growth, healing, and wanting to reconnect as sisters. I replied with 2 sentences. I wished her well. I said I wasn't interested. She didn't write again. My parents sent Christmas cards. I sent them back. We had exactly 2 phone calls in 5 years, both under 3 minutes, both painfully polite. They never apologized. I never asked. On graduation day, they didn't show up. A card arrived instead with a check and a note about being proud. I deposited the money, sent a brief thank you, packed for my new job in Boston. 2 years later, I ran into Brandon at a conference in Chicago. He recognized me first. He shook my hand and thanked me, said the email had saved him from a life built on lies. He was engaged again, to someone real this time, someone honest. We exchanged business cards we both knew we'd never use. It felt like a door closing gently instead of slamming. The last time I saw my family was at my grandmother's funeral. They looked older, smaller. Natalie asked if we could talk. I gave her 5 minutes. She told me losing everything had forced her to look at herself. She wasn't asking for help, just understanding. I told her I appreciated the honesty. Then I left. My life didn't become extraordinary. It became peaceful. And after everything, that was more than enough.